openness and transparency in that system, while at the same time keeping the old tricks and the old habits of success in place.
So to ratchet up the heresy content of the panel, you've got to do one of two things. You've either got to hold the utility harmless from the standpoint of things like rate recovery or profitability, so that it doesn't matter whether or not they do it themselves or they do it in collaboration with somebody else.
Aren't they held harmless now?
Well, no, that's not entirely true. It may be the case in California with some fairly progressive policies, but I know of places where utilities are forbidden from entering the solar PV market to compete for what would otherwise be an erosion of their load. And it's kind of like the healthcare in microcosm, because what happens is you leave the utility behind with the obligation to serve. Those consumers who can afford it are the ones that are investing in all the newfangled technologies, and you leave behind the ones who are more likely to default on their bills or to be low consumers. And in essence, you saddle this utility with this tremendous sunk infrastructure costs and the cost of maintaining that, and there's no option. I mean, they have a obligation to serve, and yet you're not giving them the opportunity. You're sort of siphoning away, you know, some of the more premium customers, the C&I, the large consumers on the residential side, you know, and that was part of the problem that PG&E had with Marin County, to be frank. As my understanding was that you were giving this opportunity for them to lose customers without having a competitive opportunity to bring them back. So one of the things you've got to do is you've either got to make it so that PG&E doesn't lose anything by working with a SunPower or a Fuel Cell Energy or a whomever to do a project in collaboration. The rates of return, the cost recovery, all the same. Or you've got to finish the job that we started in 2001 and get the competitive markets right, so that you no longer have the home field advantage, that everybody's on a level playing field, similar to what's kind of going on in PJM, in the Mid-Atlantic, with a fairly competitive market where there is a lot of innovation and a lot of new technologies coming to bear. But you've got to do one or the other, and I actually think the competitive market outcomes haven't died yet. I think we've got round 2 of that discussion coming up, both at the FERC and in Washington, D.C., as well as the states.
We had a couple of comments during the day about the consumer engagement and the lousy job with smart meters. I wanted to bring up a counterexample just to show that maybe it isn't true across the industry that all utilities are terrible at communicating to their customers. So OG&E, Oklahoma Gas and Electric, serves about 1 million customers in that state, does a great thing. When they roll out their smart meter, they proactively outbound call each customer within 10 business days of their receipt of a smart meter and start to tell them all the great new services they can sign up for, right? And that is, in part a result of probably some more relaxed regulation that allows them to offer a wider menu of products and services. But it's just good business practice on their part, and they've undertaken that expense, and as a result, before the customer gets that first bill and says, what the heck is up? Why have I got all this new information? They've had some proactive engagement with the utility. Maybe even if they don't sign up for any new services, they feel like they have that option, right? So they get the benefit of what they're paying for. So I think that's a nice model. I think there's some other good examples we can cite about things going on around the industry. But I do think California, and I've been at PG&E, I've been around this state for a long time, we have a habit of shooting ourselves in the foot. I think we simultaneously set the bar very high with some ambitious public policy, ask our old dogs to dance all kinds of new jigs, and we don't give them the tools to be successful. Utilities are highly regulated entities that respond to a regulatory mandate. They make money however we tell them they can make money. And so if we set the incentives right, they will do a lot of really innovative things.
I would point out, we do have an example closer to home that has been, is a work in progress on smart grid at SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. And my earlier comments were not meant to disparage the whole industry, but to point out that the outlier in all this, it seems, is PG&E, both from the standpoint of their customers' trust and their public policy execution. I wish somebody was here from the company to defend themselves, but this is a company that has made strategic public relations as well as I think, errors for which they should be penalized. And the problem when we talk about incentives is that the incentives always seem to just be one way. And we don't have incentives, disincentives for failure. Those all get glossed over. And so I think at some point we're going to have to examine this paradigm of guaranteed high levels of rate of return and no downside. Okay, and then tie the performance, because I actually believe cost recovery is a very, very important principle in this business, as we saw in 2001. Once there is doubt created about the utility being able to recover their money, then you don't have the platform available to do the things that we want. But at the same time, I think I'm looking for how do we get more dialogue and conversation going, given the powers of the incumbency and the pressure for innovation. It seems to me that we got to figure out a way to meet each other halfway. So, anybody else on the panel like to take a shot before we open up to questions from the audience?
Real quickly, is that the basket of regulatory tools that's going to be required to deliver something like this, I think has to look in the past and look in the future. Because when I heard the word dynamic markets, I worked in one that is extremely liquid, from the production all the way down to the end consumer, and coupled with feed-in tariffs, with essentially a take-or-pay package. We've seen spot prices drop to zero over several hours. 3 months later, it's 30 cents. Here we are trying to build a 20-year investment, very capital intensive, with the volatility of a derivative market. And I would just put some caution into that approach, particularly for renewables. They're very capital intensive, they're intermittent, and they will vary over the year. But somehow you need to get efficiency in that market. So how do you ensure that you get competitive pricing and competitive options for base load into the system that works out right for the consumer, while at the same time ensure that you have the predictability for an investment into a renewable technology? And it's not one solution for everything. I can guarantee you that most of the European markets that I've had that's been fully liquid for a good number of years have had to intervene heavily with feed-in tariffs and a bunch of other regulatory tools to get anything built. Because utilities in that situation earn more money from not investing than investing in new generation. And so some of these perverse effects that we can get while we seek efficiency has to be, I think, a very integral part of how California builds out this massive vision.
Okay, now I'd like to have us go to questions from the audience. And I think we're going to have you line up back there by the microphone so everybody can hear.
I had one question for a couple of the panelists. I'm interested in examples. I heard, I believe it's Sharif mentioning some biogas, perhaps projects that you're aware of, and then I think the gentleman from GE and Cisco had talked about some different examples of perhaps smart grid applications. I know you mentioned something in China or something like that that was a really advanced substation or something of that sort. And then I was interested in perhaps what Richard had from Johnson Controls on some of these more advanced commercial applications that your company's working on. So I don't know if you have time for some examples, but that would be interesting.
The project I was referring to is the taking a wastewater treatment gas and cleaning it up using a pressure swing absorption to pipeline quality, of which we can accept that gas in our pipeline. So therefore, it's not just the gathering of the gas, cleaning it up, monitoring the quality, and being able to inject it. That's one example. The other example is working with one of our customers that is, they produce onion. You know, this is their product.